Is China seeking to build an alternative world order by collaborating ever more closely with its Global South colleagues? As the curtain falls on the 2024 summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, participants agree to build an all-weather China-Africa community with a shared future for the new era. 10 partnership actions with concrete deliverables were announced to give meat to this concept. One can almost immediately expect a cacophony of skepticism from the West, both in the sincerity and the capacity on both sides to fulfill such ambitious goals. One question stands out, though. While the US-led West is doubling down on hard power projections across the Eurasian continent, what is China trying to achieve with trade, aid, and cultural exchanges? How effective have the two different approaches been, and where will the juxtaposed approaches lead the world to, and, to borrow Western jargon, at what cost? I'm pleased to be joined from Malacca, Malaysia by Peter Chan, Research Associate of the Malaysia-China Friendship Association, formerly Deputy Director of the Institute of China Studies of the University of Malaya. Welcome, Professor Chan, again to The Point. So in a recent article you wrote as an opinion piece for the South China Morning Post, you said that the US doubles down on military might, while China is holding out a vision of economic collaboration and trust between civilizations. Why do you make such an observation? Do you have some concrete examples to illustrate it?
Well, China's economic imprint in the global south has been very impressive. For us here in the south, in Southeast Asia, we have experienced firsthand how China's Belt and Road Initiative, for example, has really rejuvenated the economic momentum in this part of the world. It marks a relative decline of the West and US in particular economic sort of influence and dominance in global and also in Southeast Asia. So with this decline, America is increasingly finding itself difficult to defend its sort of dominance, its traditional dominance and hegemony. And you see that being replaced instead of applying economic counter economic programs to compete with China, they are falling back onto their hard power, their military power to maintain or retain some dominance in the region.
Well, you're saying they're doubling down on hard power, on military might. What specific barometers or indications are you using? For instance, sending more troops or using more coercive measures or supplying weapons? What exactly do you mean there?
Well, for example, it's a relative comparison. For example, there is a relative lack of America's economic initiatives coming into this region as compared to, let's say, 30, 40 years ago. Instead, we have seen an increase of American military presence through security alliances such as AUKUS, and then also other kind of alliances that is surrounding the Taiwan Straits or the Japanese Sea, and there is also a talk of Asia NATO establishing here. So we do feel that the Americans' presence is much more military than it was economical, let's say about 40 years ago. And likewise, the cultural imprint that America had on us in terms of its soft power was very evident to us about 40 or 30 years ago. But today, that soft power has also beginning to diminish in this part of the world. Instead, we feel more and more the Americans' hard power presence in our neighborhood.
We talk about the diminishing U.S. investment into economic relationship, into aid and trade and so on and so forth. Do you see the underlying reason being a lack of will or inability or internal division, or the disbelief that trade relations or aid assistance will help solidify peace and security for America in the region?
I think it's a reflection of China's rise as an economic power. And unfortunately, China's rise as an economic power has seen American decline in its own economic power. I think America has not found a formula in which it could come and compete or stay on path with China in terms of China's
So, so,
tremendous economic sort of advancement,
so
and they
basically,
have left.
sorry, Peter,
Uh,
for let me make that absolutely clear. So basically, you're saying America withdrew its economic collaboration with countries in the region because China stepped in. Is that what you're saying?
No, no, I don't. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that because they are withdrawing because they can't compete with China. They no longer can compete with China. They were once the dominant economic power, and then suddenly a rival came out, and they found out that they no longer can compete project by project with the Chinese. So they eventually, by just attrition that they did because they no longer can compete, they withdrew. And that's how we see the declining of the American economic footprint in this part of the world. And it's partly because, of course, China's rise and also America's own economic stagnation. They're no longer able to lead in some of the key sectors or industries that once they were once a leader, like the automobile industry, so that decline has affected their global influence.
Are you saying the United States is kind of resorting to hard power to cling on to its waning influence in these regions? But, sending troops, sending soldiers, supplying military weapons, that's also a kind of resources as well. But the United States seems to bet in the effectiveness of the hard power in maintaining its influence in the region.
I think the Americans would prefer to use their soft power to continue to build goodwill and their influence or maintain their influence in this region, but they increasingly find their soft power diminish for reasons that I've just explained. And they have, almost as a last resort, they have to fall back on their military and hard power to maintain whatever leverage they still think they have in this part of the world.
In terms of soft power, you mean the appeal of the American way of thinking, the American way of life, or probably American values as well, I suppose?
Absolutely. I think a lot of us in Southeast Asia were captivated by the American dream, the American story at the end of the Cold War with uh, the thesis of the end of history, where liberty and democracy seems to be the pinnacle of human progress. We were genuinely excited with this project. We thought that this would be the way forward for the rest of the world. But we have struggled. We have struggled to keep up to our own values and ideals. America, in particular, has also struggled to keep up to their own proclaimed values and ideals. America itself is going through a moment of crisis in their own democracy. So that soft power has really diminished. It only not affected America's own sort of pursuit of their own vision, but it's also affected for those of us who had faith in that vision that we were now considering having second thoughts. Perhaps there's another way in which we could understand what human flourishing is, what good governance is.
Well, China has been working with its counterparts in Africa to deliver concrete results to their people to push forward their economic and social development. Out of the latest FOCAC summit, which just wrapped up at the beginning of September, 10 partnership actions for modernization were announced, including those on mutual learning, on trade and prosperity, on green development. The Chinese government and companies plan to, over the next 3 years, give 220 billion renminbi as loans to African countries, 80 billion as assistance, and at least 70 billion as investment. And these projects are expected to create 1 million jobs. So do you see a different approach there, not through military coercion or hard power, but through economic collaboration and mutual learning through civilizations? And who are owning such approach?
Absolutely, Lucian. I mean, this is remarkable. China's economic miracle has been remarkable in its own way, how China lifted a big portion of its population out of poverty through the BRI. For us, BRI is in its second decade. For us in Southeast Asia, most of Asia, we have already experienced the benefit of it. And that momentum has now shifted from China to Southeast Asia, Asia, now to the African continent. This is a remarkable story, I think. It's not just a story for China, for Asia, but increasingly so, it's going to be a story, remarkable story for the Africans as well. The BRI has been amazing. It has sort of evolved from a basic brick and mortar infrastructure project into a digital BRI, green BRI, health Silk Road, education BRI. It's so holistic and comprehensive. The vision that has been laid out in terms of the Global Development Initiative is absolutely holistic. It covers almost every dimension of our human social economic well-being. And I think what is happening right now is truly remarkable for us in the global south. It's almost unprecedented. And I think we all of us have looking forward to an exciting time of social uplifting and advancement.
The optics that came out of Beijing over the past during the summit is indeed thought-provoking, I would say, to many people. African leaders, almost all African leaders were in Beijing. What does that collective presence tell us about the popularity or the sharedness of such an approach among China and African countries, besides other developing countries in other regions?
I just want to say this. For much of the modern history, the global south has lived under the shadow of the global north. We have always played second tier or the junior partner in global affairs. And what has happened right now in Beijing and previous other summits that have happened is that we're beginning to see the global south moving out of the shadow of the global north. We are claiming ourselves on the global stage. We want to be able to tell our stories. We want to be able to tell our stories of self-sufficiency and modernization that we can achieve through our own understanding what is best for us. So I think the optics are absolutely crucial. Much of the modern history has been written from the Western perspective, and now is a time in which the globals have a chance to say our own stories. And summits like this is one of those stories that tells us that, it's time for us to have our own sort of form of self-understanding and pursue our own dream. And also to try to share it as a global initiative. It's a very inclusive and pluralistic endeavor that we want to embrace as many as possible. That hopefully it will not be just a global south and a global north division, but it will truly be a global development initiative.
And some people would say, look, this is China's masterpiece, or, China is trying to lead the African countries or the global south in general to achieve some kind of selfish goals for its own. And possibly these goals, nobody really know what the intentions are. What would your response to that kind of guessing? Because there has been a lot of speculation, right, about China's intention. What is China trying to achieve? Is this a Chinese thing? Is this a China versus a hidden China? Is there a hidden Chinese agenda behind this?
If there is a hidden Chinese agenda, uh, it is this. It is to share common prosperity. There is nothing. I do not see there is anything to be read in between the lines. A lot of countries that has been participants of the BRI has attest to the benefit that it has brought to us. First in Southeast Asia, in the rest of Asia, now increasingly in Africa and the rest of the global South. There will be critics who will want to uh, pick on some of the challenges that the BRI has faced. But the broader story tells a different narrative. It has the BRI and the GDI as a whole has brought tremendous economic good to the developing world and to the global south. I think there will be detractors. We have to bear that in mind. But I think the overall trajectory, the common understanding in the global south is that this is a unique moment in human history, a unique moment in global development, where for once we can truly see that development is happening on a global scale, not through a division of West and East or North and South, that this is going to happen on a global scale. And China happens to be one of the leading actors in this development. But I think China doesn't want to claim the sole leadership. China sees itself as only one of the actors in this very multilateral, inclusive endeavor to uplift the common good of the human family.
Of course, China has articulated and repeated in multiple times by President Xi that China does not seek hegemony and China does not want to replace the United States. From a cultural background, from a civilizational level, you being a descendant of Chinese, I would assume, what in the Chinese cultural gene that makes China a believer of non-hegemonism, a believer of working together with everybody towards the same goal? Is there a cultural element that sets the two different approaches apart?
There is. In the Eastern worldview and philosophy, it is a very pluralistic worldview, inclusive worldview where the different religions of the world could coexist. In the Chinese civilization, Confucianism is at the anchor, but it coexisted with Taoism and Buddhism, and later on with Islam and Christianity. The Chinese Confucian civilization has always been pluralistic in their regard, as opposed to other worldviews such as those in the West that believes that there is only a singular way in which we could achieve the human good. Whereas the Chinese civilization, the Eastern civilization in general, has embraced this idea that there are multiple pathways in which we could understand what is good for each individual and each human society, and we should make room for that. I think the Global Civilization Initiative is absolutely critical in this much more complete picture of this community of a shared future for humankind. The civilizations of the world must learn to coexist, and we can coexist and continue to work together for the common good.
I'm going to leave it there. Many thanks to Professor Peter Chen, Research Associate of the Malaysia-China Friendship Association, formerly Deputy Director of the Institute of China Studies of the University of Malaya.